Hello, colleagues. My name is Rich Rosen, and I'm going to be discussing a portion of my research interests in enduring partnerships by focusing on the data collection methods I'm using in my applied dissertation research. There's a large body of research that's been published about partnerships over the years, but there's a gap in some of that research that relates to the actual first-person stories about how partnerships function and how they evolve over time. And that's been the focus of a specific data collection approach that I've chosen to use. And I'm going to be describing it here today because it's relevant to the way that we can think about partnerships and the way that we can design them. Before I begin, I want to tell you the context of this presentation because it's actually part of a leadership development series that I'll be presenting at the end of May this year. And it's a large audience of the cabinet and the senior members of the college. And the focus this year is the increasing role that community colleges are playing in the area of community development and partnerships for research and economic development. So one of the reasons for this development series has been to bring in outside expertise. Since our instructors and administrators spend most of their time teaching in the community, they rarely have a chance to go out and see best practices in other places. So it's cost-effective to bring expertise and experience through these types of series to them so that we can discuss it in the context of the work that they're about to conduct. And with that in mind, this is the presentation I intend to give to them, and I look forward to your feedback. Imagine this situation. Columbus State has been awarded a new partnership contract, and you and your team will lead it. And leading partnerships is something that's new to you. And so, as a good leader, you want to get an idea of what others have done and what you can learn from that work. And as you examine the research, one recurring drumbeat drowns out most everything else about what partnerships are all about. You find that more often than not, the discussion is about how partnerships have failed or how they fail to meet their objectives. Now, I can imagine this puts a damper on the enthusiasm about the likely success of your work. But fear not, because this material is not designed to keep you away from partnerships. These researchers are describing the complexity of partnerships and the many ways that they can fail because of navigating those complexities among partners. Today, my aim is to help accelerate the learning of this audience by first describing some of the challenges in just learning about partnerships themselves. I'll specifically focus on my research interest, which is called the enduring partnership, and some of the data collection methods that I'm using there. I'll provide a bit of a theoretical framework, and then I'm going to focus the majority of my time on a research contribution that I'm hoping to make to the field and specifically unlocks the nuances that have been pivotal in the endurance or in the demise that they may have been experiencing. And then we'll finish up by talking about why this matters and what you might do with some of this information. First, what does the research tell us? Well, as I mentioned, there's a large body of research about partnership. And within those materials, researchers generally agree about what makes a good partnership. But partnerships are unique to their local context. And there is no common definition of partnerships because they range from loose affiliations to multi-year co-investing in a particular cause. In attempting to understand a bit more about what does work, there has been a search for evidence. And Dowling and his colleagues identified almost 500 papers that claimed to have evidence about partnership performance. When they looked at those papers carefully, what they found was that the information was inconclusive rather than irrefutable. In general, what that meant was partnerships seemed to be a good idea. The people that they talked with and the researchers that wrote about them spoke about why they were beneficial. But there was no general causal link that really tied one to the other. And there's a reason why the body of research seems to have such a lack of specific evidence. And it has to do with how you look at partnerships. And it was actually this work by El-Ansari, Phillips, and Hammock that inspired me to think about a different style of data collection methodology for the work that I was doing. What these authors discuss is that partnerships are difficult to study because it depends on when you're looking at them and what it is you value about them. And as we know from logic models, it takes years for an intervention to actually deliver the outcomes that it intended to achieve. And so in some cases, you may see a result happening in a community and not directly tie it to the intent of a partnership that was formed years ago. And it was this band of research by El Ansari and his colleagues that led me to look for a different data collection method, because much of what I was reading was informative about how partnerships were structured and many of the challenges and success factors, but it lacked an understanding of how a partnership actually happened, and that was of significant interest to me. When I reviewed the body of prior research in partnerships, I was specifically looking for constructs, and I found that there were 12 that seemed to be recurring that were associated with partnership success. Now here are those constructs, and within them, what was of most interest to me was a series of themes that cut across these constructs that actually informed the nature of the way I needed to collect my data, organize it, so that I would be able to later analyze it for a variety of different types of themes. They describe that partnerships are about the greater good, but they need to incorporate the enlightened self-interest of each of the institutions or organizations. Boundary spanners were also pivotal to the partnerships that seemed to succeed. Now, my interest, as I mentioned at the beginning, is about a specific type of partnership that's called the enduring partnership. Partnerships fail to meet their objectives more often than they succeed, but there are some partnerships that endure and stand the test of time. And while these are rare, they do exist. And what I was interested to do was to learn more about these types of partnerships directly from the perspectives of the people in them. And that is what led me to the technology that I'll be describing that helped me keep that data together and unlock what was happening in those partnerships. Enduring partnerships was first described by Boehner, and she was the one that began to describe what some of the features of endurance seemed to be. The specific feature is being able to survive changes. And so these transitions are critical to whether a partnership continues or doesn't. In my study to better understand enduring partnerships, I sought to find several that had these three features. So this was the defining feature set in selecting partnerships for study. I combined two qualitative methods to be able to examine partnerships at the depth of my interest for endurance. The first looks at what documents tell us about how things unfold, and the second was talking specifically with people that had intimate knowledge of the partnerships and to learn about their stories. Now, one of the most important aspects of my work was to be able to take the information acquired from those methods, organize it in a manner that would help me see and unlock what was happening in partnerships over time. And I'll give you a guided tour of TimeStream in a moment, and you'll see how that visualization technique was able to keep the information together, and specifically a way to find the pivotal events that were occurring. And TimeStream became a technology tool that helped me unlock the ebb and flow of partnerships in a visual way that was extraordinarily helpful in understanding how success factors linked to time and linked to people. Understanding endurance from this perspective would be essential to help others understand what endurance looks like and how they might be able to achieve it in their own work. The technology I'll be showing you was designed for an entirely different purpose. It was to collect forensic evidence for law enforcement. And over time, the use of this technology found its way into other places, law practices, accident investigations. And I'm excited to tell you that my study was one of the first times that this technology was used specifically in educational research. Now let's take a look at how a partnership unfolds using this particular visualization approach. First, I'll familiarize you with the visualization and data collection tool. Earlier, I showed you 12 constructs that were associated with partnership success as found in the body of literature. Those constructs were coded as tags in this visualization tool, and you'll see a repeat of them here. As I acquired documents, they were entered into the file library for this visualization tool, and more than 250 documents comprised the urban partnership document research. Each document was given a particular coded title that identified the essence of what that document was describing. In this particular case, this is a document that describes when the president joins Buckeye College. The reason this technology tool was powerful for what I was intending to explore was how it allowed me to bring documents onto a timetable and preserve the original information. So, for example, a document was identified that was the press release when a new president came to Buckeye College. Now, while there may be codes that I'll show you here in a moment, the document itself is still preserved in this particular technology, so I can come back to it later and use it for other purposes and examine it in more detail. The use of TimeStream was really valuable to me because it allowed me to take documents as I gathered them and place them into the database. What's important about this technology was the flexibility it gave me to understand in these enduring partnerships how certain events happened and how they influenced other events. As documents were acquired, they were placed into this database, and I can examine time frames of interest, time windows, and look at where activities seem to be taking place. I was able to lay these down on a time scale that allowed me to see how events unfolded over time. And important for my data collection is that this visualization tool allowed for the constructs associated with success to be cross-referenced against the documents that I found in the success of partnerships. For example, the tag library itself has the constructs, and you can see here that there are 15 documents that addressed some aspect of boundary spanners. If I want to see how the boundary spanner manifests itself in the documents, you can see here that each document that has been screened are documents that are associated with boundary spanners. Now, what's important about this is that it says that boundary spanning constructs are found in these documents, but I don't necessarily know what exactly the boundary spanner context was. But in TimeStream, I preserve that. And finally, another useful feature of this visualization approach is to filter events, find the documents that related to them, and then export it. It allows for a deeper examination of those elements. For example, as I looked at what were the boundary spanner documents, find out what document it was that led me to that conclusion, and I can even open it back up. This is what I learned that I think are important implications for you as partnership practitioners. We're told that little things matter, and this is exemplified in my research about enduring partnerships. Those events that we were just looking at, many of them are little things, and within the documents, even tinier things. But when looked at in this visualization, you begin to see how that tiny thing may have related to something later that actually made a difference in the partnership. And so I hope that first, this idea of little things matter informs questions and interpretations that you may have as you're exploring partnerships. It'll help you perhaps get a deeper meaning or seek out something very specific that's important to you in your partnership. Secondly, I'm able to study these partnerships because they have a deep level of data. You have the opportunity to begin to gather specific types of data that might have been thrown away by others, but is very useful to researchers like me and others that are trying to understand what contributes to endurance and good partnership practice. And finally, I hope that this discussion helps you describe your own partnerships to others. Now, the work that I've just described, while it's comprehensive, the data itself follows my own research interests. Those documents were analyzed by me, informed by the research community about what matters, but they were translated through my own informed opinions about that. Other researchers might find other interpretations of those same documents. The primary validity issues is about the plausibility of my findings and my interpretations. Confirmability is about being able to go back to the original data and assess its integrity. And the importance of having data in a format like this is that this invites other researchers to come back and inquire about this data set in other ways. I think there's some exciting next steps with this kind of research. It's hard to study partnerships. I think that one of the useful aspects of this type of data collection method is that it can be used in scenario training with all of you and others like you, and use it as a training tool to examine what types of decisions you might make in light of those circumstances, and then see what happened in the actual partnership. And finally, narrative researchers are quick to point out that strict objectivity and distance from the partnership under study is not particularly an asset in this type of research. In fact, it can be a liability, because having a familiarity with the partnership means that you understand the context of documents. You have relationships with individuals and organizations that allow you faster access to new pieces of data. I hope this is helpful to you as you begin your own partnership experiences. The references that I referred to throughout my presentation can be found in this link, and I'd encourage you to go there if you're interested to read more.